And just let me give you a couple of examples of scale. China Mobile is the largest mobile operator in the world, mobile network. We value it in our brand study, which Millward Brown does with its Optima technique, with measuring the value of brands, as the 5th most valuable brand in the world already. Why? Because it already has 338 million subscribers, and they're growing by 6 million a month. That is 10% more than the population of the United States. I'm sure that if you went to the middle of America and said, how big is China in relation to the United States in terms of population, somebody would say, well, I think it's about the same size as the US. Somebody might say it's 2 times, maybe bigger, 3 times, but not 4 or 5 times. And by the way, let me just tell you a little story. I sat next to the former secretary of the Communist Party, a revered man in China. I sat next to him in Beijing about a year ago at a session to launch a study to determine which companies were going to be the next Fortune 1000 over the coming years, not just Chinese companies worldwide. And I was speaking to him through an interpreter. And I've had this pet theory that there are actually 1.5 billion people in China, not 1.3 billion. And 3 times through the interpreter, he said 1.3 to 1.5 billion people in China. And I said, I couldn't contain myself. I said to the interpreter after a while, I said, look, please ask him, why is it that he keeps on saying there are 1.3 to 1.5 billion people in China? And the answer came back that that's what the government, the Politburo, actually think there may be. Now, if you just think about it for a minute, an extra 200 million Chinese, that's 3.5 UKs, almost in Indonesia, and 2/3 of the United States. The scale on which we are dealing with, or what we are dealing with, is beyond our imagination. Sock City, I think in Dalan, can produce 9 billion pairs of socks a year. That's 1.5 pairs of socks for everybody on the planet. Women, to my knowledge, don't wear socks very frequently. So it's probably actually 3 pairs for every man on the planet. Don't be this is not Japan. You remember in the 80s we said Japan was going to overtake the world. And look what happened. President Reagan came along, changed American policies, and don't underestimate the Americans either. Because their resourcefulness, entrepreneurial energy, immigrant culture is very adaptable. It's like the British monarchy. It adapts very, very rapidly. But the scale of what's happening and the speed of what's happening is something that we should just not forget. And we should push our political leaders to be more acutely aware of the penalties of ignoring this.